their financing system, the way they run their at the end of the day, a media agency is a business agency. Like any other business, like any other organization, it is a business agency. So depend on funding, they have to depend on money to earn livelihood to run their organization. And there lies the problem, because there are a number of media persons who have been given tickets by political parties to contest in the Lok Sabha election, to become members of the Rajya Sabha. And they are owners of various media houses who have particular political parties. Imagine their level of integrity and impartiality as far as media is concerned. Thank you so much.
Shirada, I have a question for you. If you permit me to ask you a question.
Oh my God.
Please, just to know. Yes. Just to know that we are practicing globalization policies since 1991. And now the issue that capital has its own centralizing tendency. The capital wants to centralizing everything, attitude and all this thing. On the other hand, you have talked, when you are talking about social or participatory measures, in other words, participatory politics. But how much it is possible? Because there is a one way theoretically you are advocating kind of centralization of capital. On the other hand, you put a greater possibility, greater participation. And how do you relate these two things on the issue of corruption?
Very interesting question. Very interesting question. But to study the current trend since 1991 onwards, corruption is on the rise in India. I don't know about other countries. Yeah, there is a greater amount of transparency. There is a greater amount of awareness about entitlement. Greater amount of social corruption. In fact, there have been a anti-corruption movement during the JP days in 1970. But the anti-corruption movement which happened in 2011-12, and that was carried out by the people, the civil society organizations, and various organizations headed by eminent leaders, social activists like Aruna Roy and all. They have been talking about this democracy. They have been talking about people sort of. This particular thing sounds anachronistic, that on the one hand there is a tendency to things in one way, and there's a different tendency where you try to decentralize power. So these things, I think, I would think that these two anachronistic, competing and opposite trends would exist in India for a long time, and it would definitely strengthen India's democracy. On the one hand, there will be cartels. On the other, will be root level people's movement against these cartels, against these undemocratic tendencies which are happening, chronic capitalists. So these two different ideas are going to remain for a long time, to see how the friction arises between the two.
Sir, I have a question. Sorry that I got muted myself.
Yeah,
is there?
On. I have the pleasure to meet you.
Am I audible? Sir, actually,
yes,
my question is actually very specific. Neoliberal state agencies like institutes or the statutory bodies under Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, of road transport and highways, recent activities related to connectivity, and many other statutory bodies and institutes. Are they effective in solving all these problems, all these issues in India? Because when it comes to developmental issues like road and transport, many, I think there are many cases of nepotism and economic corruption. So can you please enlighten us about this?
Yeah, begin with a particular example. This was my research question when I was thinking about doing a research paper on CBI. Aware of the fact that the Supreme Court 2012 or 14, I don't remember the exact date, had already passed a scathing judgment. CBI was called the cage parrot. RI is the most important agency dealing with corruption in investigation of corruption cases. But it's parrot speaking the language of. So there lies the problem. The people who are in the helm of affairs, the people who have been appointed with corruption cases, they are appointed by the politicians, are appointed by the members of the parliament, and they are accountable to them. And still, we are yet to develop mechanisms to insulate such bodies against political pressure. But definitely, there have been number of court cases, and still they are going on, and there have been number of amendments being done as far as CBI is concerned to insulate it from political pressure. But it is an ongoing process. Like you implement a law, you try CBI, important statutory bodies like CBC and other bodies, completely insulate them from political pressure. At the same time, the government will tweak the law and leave a loophole so that there is a window through which they can pressurize these institutions to follow their day. So this is an ongoing process. It has been going on since 2000. The Congress government did it. The BJP government is also doing it. But at the same time, number of it's like Prashant Bhushan and other corruption activists, anti-corruption activists, they have been filing affidavits in the Supreme to make these bodies more foolproof so that they are subject to political pressure, so that they can remain neutral and can operate in a free way. So this is an ongoing process. If you are interested, then you can read my paper on this particular aspect related to CBI. It recently came out. So this is an ongoing debate. It's not today there will be an amendment and everything will stop. There will no be corruption or no kind of politicization of these statutory bodies. Again, there will be laws passed by the Indian Parliament to make these institutions pliable. Again, there will be a movement.
and international holding labor rights. So the role of ILO also becomes very important in context of human rights, and since its inception has adopted 181 legally binding conventions and 188 recommendations aimed at improving labor standards across the globe. Four labor standards. What are these labor standards? Right to freedom of association and collective bargaining, elimination of forced labor, elimination of labor, elimination of discrimination in matter of occupation and wages. And also there are 7 conventions. Conventions number 29, 87, 98, 105, 111, and 138. Now, what is the conventions? The purpose of these conventions, which are also known as social clause, they concern about the labor. So, in a way, we see that these are the instruments in the hands of ILO to improve the living and working conditions of the working class. These, migrant laborers who belong to the sector. And interestingly, India has ratified 47 of these 181 conventions. So there are also, we have ratified certain of the international labor organizations to ensure betterment of the conditions of the labor. And labor doesn't mean people who are working in the organized sector, it also in unorganized sector. Migrant labor, what do we understand by migrant? Migrant labor basically are workers who migrate from other within the state or the country in order to get seasonal or temporary or part-time work in different sectors. So these are who do not have any kind of yes, madam, I am winding up to stay on a permanent basis, and there are various reasons why we have migrant laborers. For various reasons. It could be due to the distance, for duration, and then classifications of migrant laborers. It could be urban, urban to rural, urban to urban. There are classifications based on the casual, temporary, seasonal, permanent, and so on and so forth. The important point of discussion that the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and migrant labor through human rights, basically. Now, as per the 2001 census, obviously the numbers would be a little more. There are 14 crore migrant laborers in India. And these migrant laborers, basically, they all belong to the unorganized sector. And, as I have told that since of the lockdown, these migrant laborers have walked out from the, industrials on foot. They have been traveling on foot and experience countless misery, and obviously it needs the reason there is no reason not to believe that their human rights, the basic human rights, have been violated. Because if we go by the International Labour Organization, if Article 14 and 21 of the Indian, the state of pure a decent life for this migrant labor. Since most of these migrant laborers are belonging to the unorganized sector, the government has, due to the poor planning of the government in the pandemic situation, these, migrant laborers have been basically thrown. They have had to put up with lot of, abuses.
So
as for example, one of
we are running short of time. We have paucity of time. Please conclude.
So what I wish to see us is, in conclusion, is that even though we have Migrant Workmen's Act 1979, there are provisions to have record of workers, but basically the state taking proper care of these workers, they simply because they are belonging to the unorganized sector, and most of the social security which we have, they are applicable to workers who are in this organized sector. So in conclusion, madam, what I wish to say is that the state, judiciary, the civil society, proactive steps in ensuring that the human rights of these migrant workers are because let us imagine a situation. If we had this COVID-19 situation, would we be discussing about the migrant workers? No, we would not be discussing migrant workers, and their apathy and their pattern would continue. So therefore, this is a situation. The COVID-19 pandemic has given us a situation to introspect our labor laws. And it is also the duty that there are adequate, it comes up with adequate provision so that human rights of these workers are protected. And I wish to conclude with a quote Martin Luther King Jr., injustice is a threat to justice everywhere. So basically, what has happened is injustice has been done to this migrant. This could be anywhere. This injustice could any other place. Therefore, it is high time that we wake up, and it's not only the state and the judiciary, but also the civil society, and we our voice in unison so that the human rights of these workers are protected.
Thank you so much. Your paper is very informative and lucid. Thank you so much, Professor Datta. And you said that this is the time to introspect our results. In fact, when it comes to the society, our response is also very selective. Not only if you consider the civil society, if you consider intelligentsia, their response towards the issue is very much selective. In this case of COVID-19, this has been prevalent from time immemorial, I think. So you talked about human rights of the migrant workers and laborers as well. And in this context, I can say world has repeatedly criticized India on its labor laws and enumeration and enforcement of labor laws. In this case, I think there can be a raised question. We can find out a raised question that whether enumeration of stricter labor laws can enumeration of protecting labor laws can create further problem of employment of the laborers in the case of organized, both the organized and organized sector. So for your paper, thank you so much for liberation. Now I'd like to proceed to the I proceed to the next speaker, Noshkar. Are you there? Bikash Noshkar, are you there, sir? No. Deepshi Charji. Charji.
Yeah, present.
Somdatta Bhattacharjee or Deepshika?
This is Deepshika Bhattacharjee.
Okay, madam. Please, please. Deepshika Bhattacharjee, I think it is your description, right? Assistant Professor, Department of Law, Assam, University of Silchar. Your
Yes.
Deepshika madam's paper, Corona Crisis and its implication on the migration in developing countries. Okay. Please proceed.
Yeah, thank you and good afternoon to all of you. Though, as the chair has already mentioned, it's its impact on migration and developing countries. Now, let me present.
To 5 minutes time slot. 5 minutes time slot.
Yes, I'll try. Let me present my PPT. Is it visible? Okay.
Your station is not visible.
Okay.
There is a present button present now.
Yes,
If you're
yes.
on laptop, you can see a button present now.
Madam, still not visible.
Still not visible?
Yes, I'm trying. Visible now?
No, it's still not visible. It's still not visible. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, now visible. Yes. Please proceed.
Yes. Thank God. So, as I mentioned, my title detail. Start with, let us give me a background of this COVID-19 on developing countries. So the majority of developing countries are deeply, as we all know, are deeply integrated into goods and labor supply chains, and they will feel effects of declining demand in very short term. And current travel restrictions will also have a severe impact on communities reliant on tourism, and then restrictions on internal migration. Further mobility is disrupted, which will impact the livelihoods of migrants and their families further. The thing is, countries and communities reliant on the labor migration remittances will in fact see a double impact from this crisis, as in addition to remittances, these communities will need to absorb an increasing number of returning labor migrants unable to find work in countries of destination. So I'll just go to the next slide, and I'm going directly to the migrants, or I mean, on migrants and their families of this COVID-19 crisis. First point is declining remittances, where like the remittances are, I mean, in developing countries, on an average, it is 75% of the remittances go towards essentials such as day-to-day expenses, healthcare, education, etc. And I mean, and the remainder, remainder of the remittances, they contribute to a variety of longer-term objectives such as business, startup, real purchases, etc. Now, in many cases, they need formal or informal loans to cover the costs of their recruitment and travel. Now, if employment is cut, migrants are and their families will find no way of paying back existing debts also. Now, next impact is poverty. Under this declining, it will result in many households in the developing countries or the origin countries of the migrants. I mean, falling back under poverty, as well as cutting back on expenses, including healthcare and education. Now, decisions to choose school and, in the worst cases, engage in labor or to postpone or reduce medical treatment easily reversed, and this will have long-term negative consequences for the families dependent on remittances. Third impact is unemployment. So migrating to limited opportunity run the risk of facing long-term unemployment and in a abroad, and weak social reintegration in their communities. Challenges to social reintegration will be further worsened by negative and stigmatization about returnees, with returnees being blamed for like bringing back 19 into the country and causing further impact. So these are the problems specific to the migrants and their families. Now, in the next slide, we'll be discussing the impact of COVID-19 on the migrants' countries of origin. Their home countries. So the first is that at the community level, this declining remittances will have a knock-on effect within local economies. How? Like families dependent on the remittances will cut back their spending, and this declining consumption will impact local economic activity. But in some cases, this may have positive impact. Apparently, local producers, as consumers switch their purchasing habits from expensive imports to lower cost local brands. However, broadly, declining remittances place additional downward pressure on local activities across communities in the origin countries. Next impact is that it will put pressure on labor. Now, how? Like, as a vast number of workers are returning back to the communities of origin, the youth there in the origin countries, there are many of people who have been planning to go abroad for work. Now they will find employment within the local labor market. Result is a surge in labor supply in
Professor
economics.
Bhattacharjee, you have 2 minutes left. 2 minutes left.
Try to do that, and that already like the I mean already is underdeveloped or developing countries, and in the countries are not going abroad, will put extra pressure on the labor market. So I'm just winding up. First is there should stimulate and incentivize the sending of remittances, which can serve to stabilize or reduce the decline of remittances in the short term. Next is that programs to support inclusion of inclusion of returnees or remittance recipients in existing financial programs, development of dedicated migration system that can support economic mobilization. Third may be that there are campaigns and community programs aimed at addressing the negative stereotypes about the returnees. Now, here, media and communication campaigns integrate behavior insights, and community group activities can serve to address stigmatization and promote social integration of the migrants. And then a majority countries, and particularly countries depending on international labor migration, they suffer from poor labor management system. So employment or job matching services need to be built up and expanded in communities of origin, so that people can get news of new opportunities or jobs. My last 2 points are the last 2 points concentrate on of like the developed countries, but it is not that the developed countries throw this developing countries. It is in their that governments in the countries of destiny, which is mostly the developed countries, they should avoid reactionary measures, shut their as we have seen through previous recessions, labor shortages in both high skilled occupations can coexist with high rates of employment at their national level. Government should programs with the expectation that hiring practices and use programs when the local labor market is not responding to them. At the same time, government should increase the flexibility of the work permit conditions of the migrants in the country to allow them to seek employment in sectors and occupations that are seeing rising demand in the current context. Union member states have already begun an effective response to the rapidly changing labor markets, and the last and occupations where labor mobility takes place informally, given border closures and the changing public health dynamics of like mobility, to consider programs that quickly regularize and manage seasonal migration while also being mindful of needs for firms, and employment conditions of these sectors. So with this, we can only hope that better times will come soon, and the time will be good for both migrants and the countries. So thank you. I hope my and thank you for a patient hearing.
Nicely about not only on the migrant laborers but also the families, and your paper is also having a public problem solving aspect. It is a kind of action research, I think, because you talked about the solutions. You talked about the local responses, so that migrant workers can handle their losses and handle their problems of livelihoods. Without much ado, since we are running short of time, I'm not going to ask any question right now. If we have time, then we will discuss it again. Next speaker is Taposh Sarkar. Are you there, Taposh? Are you there? Okay, Taposh Sarkar is not there. Taposh Sarkar, are you there? Taposh Sarkar, are you there? Okay. Atita Sunil, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Atita Sunil, she's a PhD research scholar at the School of International Relations and Politics, MG University, Kota, Kerala, and her paper is Challenges Faced by Migrant Workers in in urban slums in India, a COVID-19 scenario. Atita, the floor is yours now. Please proceed. And please stick to the time of, please stick to the time of 5 minutes, okay? 5 minutes slot.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. A very good afternoon to all present over here. Myself Atita, and I'm going to discuss on challenges faced by migrant workers in India in this COVID-19 pandemic scene. And as we all know that the 21st century rapid growth of urban population due to rural-urban migration, which has resulted in the creation of slums with an alarming magnitude. And according to census 2011, 65.5 million people lived in slums which are distributed among 2,613 towns or cities, which means no big cities have means every cities in our nations. And we are wondering how the migration causes the proliferation of urban slums, because people in rural areas primarily depend upon agriculture, which provides seasonal employment. The lack of employment opportunities in rural areas, like the famines, floods, and forced eviction for developmental activities, also lead to the high rate of migration. And the people in rural area migrated to urban areas for better living conditions, but the ability of these accommodate the migrants by means of offering employment and access to land and basic so that the latest census 2011 says that more than one-fifth of the unemployed migrants live in slums, and most of the slum dwellers belong to the bottom of the economic status as well as the social strata. And as we all know that what are the common characteristics of urban slums in our country, like lack of basic services, lack of access to sanitation facilities and clean water, absence of waste collection systems, and other characteristics. And houses may be built on rough land, and the lack of security of tenure. Then they are lack of any formal documents of their tenure is also an associated problem. So that they have so many problems like social exclusion and so on. And why we are discussing about slum dwellers, especially the migrants in slum areas, because they are the most vulnerable ones in during this COVID-19 pandemic. They are facing high risk of COVID-19 due to standard living conditions in slums and other informal settlements. And we are witnessing the like relatively big outbreak in Dharavi, Mumbai, or the spread of the diseases in the slums of Delhi, Bhopal, Tamil Nadu, etc. Somehow the risk is there because the people in the settlements cannot afford to ensure physical distancing, hygiene, access to essential, work at home and get covered under other social measures. The urban poor are actually struggling to survive. They are the real victims, but the irony is that they are often blamed for spreading the disease and become target of stigma.
Role in them. Without much ado, right now I'd like to proceed to the next speaker as we are running short of time. Orun, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Yes,
Yes,
Orun Mishra. He's a LLM of Department of Law, Bankura University. His paper is Migrant Workers Battle with Hunger and Poverty in the Era of COVID-19, an analysis of Indian labor laws. Please proceed.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Firstly, I would like to thank the committee for giving me this opportunity to present my paper. My migrant workers battle with hunger and poverty, the era of COVID-19, and analysis of Indian labor laws. Firstly, tiny dusty feet of the little children in the morning newspaper really makes us think how many to work smooth. So here the new menace because as a name of the COVID-19. Borders were sealed, transportation got stopped, the migrants workers anxiety becomes relevant, and we got seen these pictures in the newspaper. The dream of workers for a better future now has been crushed. Now every meal is struggle for them. Most of them started fleeing from various cities, native places, and this is not the end. When they reach to the native places, they are seen as a potential carriers of the infection and with the police, locals, and also forced denial of timely medical care. Migrant work new, but this COVID-19 shows the ground reality. If we see the global scenario, then the same picture will be seen in the Mexico and United States border. The thousands of people are waiting there. In Middle East, the same picture also prevail. But at the same time, various countries and nations have responded to the impact of COVID-19 on migrants and the ways to provide support to the migrants. Preamble of the Constitution by the Parliament Act in 1976. Specific purpose for incorporating this in our preamble. Privilege means there should be no gap between the rich and poor. COVID-19 already exposed this. 14 of the Indian Constitution. Everyone should be equal before the law, where Article 15 specifically says that the state should not discriminate against the citizens. Here also, COVID-19 exposed this. 31C states that if any law has been made for giving effect to any of the provision of the directive of state policy, it will not be deemed to be extant. But if central government or the state government make a law for giving word of the use in the Article 43, the decent standard of life with full enjoyment of the leisure and social and cultural opportunities to the this situation would not have been arrived. Implementation of the law. According to Article 43, workers should have the right of living on condition of work, ensuring a decent standards of life. Been frame a rule for implementation of this act. Unorganized workers, social security, who is not covered by these migrant workers. So, in another aspect, the many states violate the laws, and Gujarat, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh impose to work increase 24 hours from the earlier stipulated time. So the Supreme Court, Alok Srivastava versus Union of, in the case, the Supreme Court directs the local administration to arrange the shelter homes or accommodation with proper food under the medical supervision in a manner. In another writ petition, Shumoto writ petition filed by the Supreme Court, directed that all
special migrant and others standard. Additionally, their service was additional charge from their normal fares. The central government then faced the opposition with the Indian National Congress, promising to sponsor the TIC workers. The government announcement their railways would after 85% subsidy on the train. State government funding the remaining 15%. Additionally, the central government states stood for the migrant workers' travel resulted in history between Maharashtra, disagreement between Maharashtra and their states and other states. A few days after Shramik special train introduced, the government cancelled the trains and state Bihar did the same to train Kerala. The states later reverted their decisions. In this case, center and states failed to offer current and holistic plan of action to avert the migrants. According to reports, there was enough food grain grain stocked after in the FCI godowns to feed the poor for at least a year and a half. Schemes ensured the poor would get additional rations due to the lockdown. System failed to effective as the ration cards are specific and fair price shops were largely abandoned. Additionally, the One Nation, One Ration Card system has been in very few states. As of mid-April, the scheme allowed migrant workers to retrieve food gains for free and annual across the country. Very few
Asanujman, please try to conclude.
yes, ma'am.
Please try to conclude.
Scheme in addition also required bio authorization, which was disconnected due to fears of swelling of various through hormone sensors. Telangana many could not avail of the ration due to a lack of as such many were left without
is a good as an important part regarding the corona crisis in terms of problem in a very general way. It should be discussed. Okay, I think that this thing is to be needed more thoroughly investigated because labor problem. This is a thing which no government address very serious.
Government. So I think this is a problem of democratic decentralization. Take up such courses. It is very difficult in every sphere when it comes to any kind of social or any problems. This happens in democratic decentralized situation. Madam Papia Deb about class character of labor migration or the migrated labor. Do you find any kind of racist characteristics of this particular situation? Madam Papia Dev, are you there? I think she left. Okay.
Many of us left.
Yes. Rakhi Chaudhuri, Rakhi Chaudhuri, are you there? Rakhi Chaudhuri, are you there? Is not there.
No. She has.
Deepshika is there. She talked about household issues. We take on household on sustainable mobility of urban slums through so-called smart regional projects. Madam Deepshika, can you hear
Excuse me,
me?
Pranota. Excuse me, Pranota.
Okay,
Pakhi Chaudhary is here. You can make a comment
okay,
to her.
okay. Rakhi talked about
I think here.
Narchem state relation. Rakhi, can you comment? Can you share your take on administrative glitches? Any take on administrative? I don't think. Well, I think the technical glitch that many of the participants may not hear us. Okay,
Yes,
comes
yes,
out
yes.
from the entire session that issue of migrant labor has, remained excluded for a long time. Obviously, COVID-19 has redrawn our attention to the issue, but in this context, we can understand that developing countries are extremely poor in settling these issues, as neither they have the affirmative economic sector nor they have the cohesive policies. Like India has legislation, but methodical enforcement of them is extremely gloomy. Moreover, the statist approach towards migration, labor migration, or the forced migration, and the labors of organized sector is, I think, extremely persuasive rather than effective. And in this context, I must say, let's not forget internally displaced persons of Tor of Assam, those who are actually settled for their livelihood and works, and later on, due to the ethnic clashes, they have been evicted from their lands and their livelihood. And let's not forget the miseries of Chakmas and Hajongs, those who are struggling to ensure their livelihoods, and they're kind of stuck between the citizenship issues. And yes, we can say that issues of NRC and CA largely affected the labor crises and the labor migration issues. So I think in this session we can find out that we need proper and cohesive responses, not only from the government but also from the intelligence and also from the civil society. So to solve this problem, to see the miseries, to settle the issues of labors, we just cannot depend on the government single-handedly. We have to raise the voice. So I would like to conclude this session. Thank you so much. Session closed. Thank you. Dr. Sheel, now it's over to you. I think this is going
I
to be
think I
your
have
session.
26 minutes. I have
Okay.
minutes. I have to start from 20, so I have 6 minutes in hand.
Okay.
For your since you have concluded your session, sometimes I feel that before we take the notion of migrated labor, we have to properly understand who is migrated labor.
Exactly.
Because we are not migrated labor, or who is doing a good job in somewhere in Bangalore, or in Chennai, in a very sophisticated multinational company. We are not calling him as a migrated labor. But why? Why? We are trying to relate a particular segment of people who are doing manual worker, who doing a manual work, and consider themselves as a lower strata of the society. We are trying to identify them as a migrated. But why? But I am not very sure that because when
journalization is taking place in USA, and a lot of people coming back to India just because of they have lost their job, and obviously those jobs are not a blue collars job but white collars job. Labor. They went there for doing something may not be that is part of manual labor, because in developed countries the rate of manual labor is minimizing. And all the jobs are very much technocratic in nature. So why we are not calling them as a migrant labor just because of that fact that that they are not doing manual work just like ours. So this is the thing, and we all know that from West Bengal, where for extra income, the number is not very small. Rather, the number is very alarming. Why? Because, and this is the question where I should say that migration, labor migration and migrant labor are different things, and we cannot use as the same concept, as the same thing in altogether. When we are talking about migrant labor, we have to some way or other address the issue of labor problem and in a very, very substantive manner. We cannot address the question of labor migration. Whether labor migration or migrated labor, labor migration is something very different, and migrated labor is something very different. Migrated labor, he is migrated because he has no option to sell his labor or land. That's why they are migrating. But labor migration is something because he has to earn, he could earn greater money. That's why he is migrated. So these two terms cannot be used in a very interchangeable manner. These two terms need to be qualified in a proper context. So I think that these issues are there,
these can be correlated but cannot interchangeably. And I think the proper categorization of labor migration and migrant laborers should be done, and
needed.
Also the generations and also the proper categorization of labor should be done. I think further investigation should be taken up.
Yes.
You're flickering. Your voice is flickering, sir. Are you there, sir?
Yes. You hear me?
Okay. Now I think now it's time for technical session 2. Corona crisis.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Crisis and impact on socio-economic fabric in India and human security. This session would be chaired by Dr. Shil, and this is over to you, sir. Please.
And best of luck for your name. So thank you. And we have 8 participants with paper presenters, and I would like to request all the paper presenters to confine yourself within 6 minutes. Some
district Bakuda, very humble people in my, that is Indian proletariats and pandemic. As far as the human civilization is concerned, very few phenomena throughout its history which have shaped our societies and cultures, or the pandemics or infectious disease. Social science. When an epidemic spreads beyond a country's border, that's when the disease officially becomes a pandemic. Throughout history, pandemic outbreaks have ruined societies, determined outcomes of war, wiped out the entire population, but also paradoxically led to the patterns and advances in sciences, economics. As far as the subject matter associated with this corona or COVID is concerned, a lot has been said since morning, to say a rather I would like to concentrate issues related with the proletariats or migrant workers or laborers or what the central and the state government has done for the son of their hardships. As far as the central governments, the central government and efforts are related with adopted by the central government. 36 hours after the lockdown announcement by the Prime Minister, a special economic package of 20 lakh crore or equivalent to 10% of India's GDP aimed towards making the country ready for the tough competition in the global supply chain and empowering the poor. Ordered. This Bharat Abhiyan, following the minister, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, detailed the measures under the economic packages, such as was the decision to provide relief to 80 crore poor Indians. Under Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, it was aimed to provide food security by the government public distribution system and social benefits including case-based aid benefit transfers. In addition, some other relief measures have also been announced, such as delivery of cash and pensions by Indian Post in some states and further livelihood. Some concessions were also given field of tax concessions and relief for health sector. Department of Health is related. The Ministry of Health and Welfare issued updated containment plan on COVID-19 and updated containment plan for outbreaks of COVID-19. Information and various scenarios of COVID-19 and strategies to control the spread of diseases, definitions, action plans, and specific details on identification of containment zones and buffer zones, perimeter control, sub various stakeholders such as testing laboratories and hospitals, pharmaceuticals and non-pharmaceuticals interventions, and risk communication. There are some areas where the central government will ask tweeted themselves. For example, international air travel has been suspended. Metro rail services, other rail services, running up schools, college, universities like our Bakuda University, other training schools, hotels, restaurants, and other hospital services are absolutely closed. Places of large public gathering, such as public halls, shopping malls, gymnasium, entertainment, have also been supposed to be absolutely rather closed for the people. Now, what are the directives or directions of the government to be followed by the people? For example, we are not supposed places unnecessarily. And if visit the public places, we are supposed to wear a mask in our faces. Even spitting is absolutely punishable with fine prescribed in accordance with its laws, regulations by the state or the concerned state. Marriage-related gathering has also been limited to only 50 for a funeral or last rite. Maximum number of persons allowed is 20. Consumption of liquor, pan, gutka, or other intoxicants, etc. is also not. And as far as the workplaces are concerned, for example, we do work in colleges, university schools, public places, places. There also everyone is supposed, to maintain a distance, or supposed to work maintaining a distance in offices. There will be provisions. There must be a provision for thermal screening, hand wash, and sanitizers at all entry and exit points and common areas. All sanitizers at all entry and exit points and common areas. All verses and other sensitive locations are to be sanitized regularly. And foremost, which is rarely found in the market or other place. As I visited market in Asansol and I rarely found it. Nevertheless, it's the order of the central government that sourcing must be followed, through adequate distribution workers, adequate gaps between shifts, staggering the lunch break of staff, and so on. Even the central government has installed the Arogya application on compatible mobile phones of all individuals. For what? To regularly update our health. As far as the travel and movement is concerned, the central government has started, it is also conducting special trains from all districts connecting railways in the country. The Ministry of Home Affairs buses people from railway stations to their homes. As all these measures have been undertaken by the central government in order to mitigate the hardships of the proletariats in or the artisans or the workers. And as far as the government of West Bengal is concerned, it is also ahead in this field to remove the difficulties of these proletariats. So the state government has also
You have only 1 minute.
the state government set up the state government has set up a 24/7 control room which is operating from the state home. It has set up isolation facilities in different medical district hospitals, subdivisional hospitals, and most importantly, multi-speciality across the state. As far as the is concerned in our West Bengal, the government of West Bengal has created a rupees 200 crore fund to deal with the impact of COVID-19. Government has also mandated a relief package for 8.8 crore people who will get subsidized ration for the.
It is based on the centrality of the public and deliberation of cannot fare well in pandemic situation with emergency government the order of the day. Consequently, apart from the West, it is more complicated if we compare it with our society. The virus is explicitly being used to further strain in post-colonial societies. COVID-19 is far more than a health crisis here. The economic crisis is a severe fallout of the virus is grim and much grimmer of post-colonial society like India. As a measure of contain of the community transmission of the virus, the government has announced a nationwide lockdown and the impact of lockdown which is turning out to the immiscible. It is said that almost 90% of labor power in India working in the informal economy, that part of economy which thrives on daily work and daily cash with little provision of employment protection. The closure has exposed millions of workers and their families of starvation, hunger, and very black future prospect in one side, and on the other some are enjoying leisure with newly introduced work culture of work from home. In both the cases, the homo bodies are prime concern, but considerably it is the other body which is more important to concern about precautional standpoint. As Foucault argued in his Discipline and Punish, wanted to distinguish between an effect of the two. That is, the first is marked with quote, the second analyzed and distributed, the exile of leper and the arrest of the plague. The response to COVID-19 shows on drawns of the other. In fact, the strategy of exclusion. Yes.
Okay. Now I would like to ask Professor Chandan Roy to deliver his paper. Professor Chandan Roy.
Yes, sir, I am here. Good afternoon, respected chair and my dear fellow participant. And my paper is entitled Impact of COVID-19 Pandemic on Unorganized Sectors. This is the general title, although my paper, in my paper, I like to highlight particularly on the maid servants in the COVID-19 situations and their livelihood positions of the maid servants. Before the outbreak of the coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemic situation, everything was going well for the life of maid servants. Almost all maid servants are living by working in 4 or 5 houses. Even sometimes they work more than 7 to 10 households or flats in the town. They are basically the main earning member of their family. A large number of maid servants are widow or their husband left them with 1 or more than or 2 children. Maid servants and their employers' relations is mainly interdependent. On the one hand, extreme poverty compels unskilled slum dwellers to seek jobs as domestic helpers as a way of earning, living, and smoothly running their family. On the other hand, middle class families, particularly those families whose husband and wife are engaged in the service sectors, they are by and large dependent on domestic helpers and maid servants and domestic servants. If we highlight on that particular point, uh, before going to start further discussion, it is needed to clear the concept of maids and domestic helpers. A maid is a household worker who basically cleans houses, wash clothes, dishes, utensils, and performs various other tasks in the all days. While the aristocratic families from their domestic help, they are the most vulnerable section of the society during the pandemic situation. It is also unacceptable that the house help alone is being targeted. On 25th March, when PM Modi announced the country-wide lockdown, the first impact of its lockdown was directly attack on the domestic servants. Initially, a good number of employers give unemployment wages to their maid servants and their domestic helpers. But after the second, third, and fourth phase of lockdown, the mentality of employers is drastically changed. Majority of the employers have not given unemployment wages to their maid or other domestic servants. Some of the maid servants are exploited by their employers in various ways. A few employers offer a space to stay at night to serve them or attend all elderly people both day and night at very low wages and argue that if they go or to the outside, they may be infected with coronavirus. So the maid has no alternative to earn during this lockdown period. They agree. In many cases, there are so many obstacles for continuing services during this pandemic and lockdown period. There's lots of do's and don'ts everywhere. A large number of domestic workers, were asked to quit work for unlimited periods. Their logic is that the domestic helpers are basically slam dwellers. Maintaining lockdown and social distancing is not possible for them in crowded colonies or slum areas. Even if they have very little or no access to clean water, they have very low immunity power, lack of hygienic facility, and are bound to stay in highly dense areas. So there is a big chance of spreading coronavirus. Despite knowing all these factors, some of the employers pursue maid servants to continue their work. They are also aware that the maids are roaming around and working in the different flats or houses. Their employers have the logic that they maintain utmost level of hygienic, provide sanitizers, make them wash their hands frequently, provide them separate footwear, clothes, etc. Even sanitize everything which they touch. Domestic workers and maid servants have I have already mentioned this thing. Objective of these papers is, the main objective of this study is to find out the following questions or rather points. Will housemates or domestic helpers be allowed to work during lockdown? This is the first objective or first question. And the second question or objective is, one maid servant allowed to work only one house or can work multiple house during this lockdown situation? The fear of escape coronavirus or COVID-19 has left the residents in a dilemma on the basis of whether the maid servants and other domestic helpers allowed to work in the apartment or flat or residential area or locality or not. During the second phase of lockdown, the Ministry of Home Affairs issued a new set of guidelines and permitting some domestic helpers in some activities where corona positive cases are relatively less. At the same time, the government left this matter to the individuals. In case anyone gets infection of, the responsibility goes to the individual, says the report. On that particular point, debate takes place in many apartment, residential area and locality on this issue. Residents of various apartment and locality of the town have straight divided into two categories. One portion strongly argues there for the continuation of the households in their domestic health. On this category, the majority are.
You have only 1 minute.
Okay. On the other hand, some of the residents are strongly opposed to allow the maid servants in their apartment or locality from outside, they are arguing that a strong restriction should be maintained to enter the maid servants. A large number of women in the district of Malda not only work in the town, but also they migrate across the state and the country. But during the COVID-19 pandemic, due to the proclamation of lockdown situation and social distancing concern, this section become fully workless and incomeless. With inadequate government aid and rescues, they are surviving somehow with their families. In such circumstances, the livelihood issue of this section was raised an issue of academic discussion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Chandan Roy. And please stay with us if you have.
And apart from that, these are the areas which need to be looked after. So,
because government, now naturally it's a developing economy, so we cannot expect to be equal towards everybody. But conveniently, we have seen the government avoiding it, and the government was never equal towards its own refugees. Possible also. So there has been a pre-existing inequality which is increasing in this pandemic situation as well. So, and the refugees are excluded from social protection system, and they rarely are they are granted Aadhaar cards or any identity proofs. And owing to uncertain documentation, they are not given their dues. Is work in extremely exploitative and marginalized sectors of the informal economy. They don't have access to credit system, and that is the reason they are more and more exploited. Because of inadequate documents, they have no access to the formal credit system. And another thing which is very, very important is, since they migrate, they do not have proficiency in the languages, local languages, and many a times what happens is they are misinformed. So that is a very big problem. Now, what has been the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on refugees? Now, the refugees are viewed as carriers of virus because Tablighi Jamaat and this took place where the Rohingya refugees were seen with suspicion. So this has been happening, and they were thought that they are carrying the virus, and that they are facing obstacles. Now they have higher risk of infection because they live in very cramped habitations, which is very, very which increases the risk of infection. And of course, the poverty is a very big problem. They don't have inclusive protection strategies to improve. And the government has recently announced fiscal package to deliver target benefits to the most severely affected citizens, and all the focus has been to the migrant workers as such. So, but again, refugees are excluded as beneficiaries of these response plans of government, and of India is already overburdened with healthcare system, and there are paucity of resources as well, which makes it difficult. Livelihood, subsequent loss of income. These refugees meager savings, and some of them are in the brink of starvation. And now closure of schools have also translated into suspension of
supply chain disruption due to migration of workers during COVID-19. As you all know, according to the WHO, coronavirus disease is an infectious disease caused by a newly discovered coronavirus. The impact of coronavirus pandemic has been largely disruptive. It has resulted in an economic and labor market shock, impacting not only supply but also demand. Disruptions to production have spread to supply chains all across the world. All businesses are facing serious challenges, especially those in the aviation, tourism, and hospitality industries, with a real threat of significant decline in revenue, insolvencies, and job losses in specific sectors. Sustaining business operations will be difficult for small and medium enterprises. Due to lockdown, travel ban, border closures, and quarantine measures, many workers cannot move to their places of work, which has effects on income, particularly for informal and casually employed workers. Consumers in several economies are unable or reluctant to purchase goods and services. The decline in economic activity and constraints on people movement is impacting manufacturing as well as services. World and regional supply chains have also been disrupted. My study basically focused on how the migration of workers disrupt the supply chain how businesses are tackling this problem, and
necessary to pause the spread of pandemic situation. And during lockdown period, government has announced to shut down schools, colleges, many public sectors, many more shopping mall, and many and people are stay at home. And in this crucial time, the impact of pandemic is visible across sectors globally. Government also set up quarantine facilities where total 31.6 lakh people in quarantine in India. But during lockdown period, women has brought in situation where women tend to neglect their own requirements while prioritizing life and budgets of others in family and issues like menstrual hygiene upon realization of other human rights. There include right to food, housing, work, education, human dignity, life, non-discrimination, equality. So all of things, these and other rights and freedoms here, right to life, right to health, provides facilities, goods and services available in sufficient quality, accessible to everyone without discrimination, and affordable for all and even marginal groups. And governments obligated to take effective steps for prevention, treatment and control of epidemic, endemic, occupational and other diseases. So next, according to US government signed three relief acts into law. I mentioned Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Supplement Appropriates Act 2020. It's called Phase 1, and Phase 2 is Families First Coronavirus Response Act 2020 and Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security Act 2020. Here, phase 1 is related, includes dollar 8.3 billion emergency funding
Time
to
up,
combat
time up. You please conclude.
Okay, and
Please
Indian
conclude.
also Indian legal perspective, the government announced lockdown to stop spread this killing virus according to the Disaster Management Act 2005 and under 6 of the Ministry of Home Affairs, and also take necessary guidelines under 10 section 10
free education sectors, finance sectors, insurance companies, healthcare, etc. So which are I have already discussed analytically in the full paper. Due to the shortage of time, it is not possible to discuss all in detail here. Even though here I would like to highlight just one important point. That is one important sector, that is labor sector. Labor sector, because workers or labor sectors contribute a major there to Indian economy, and migrant of human labor is a strategy of millions of people for livelihood in India. Permanent migrant workers constitute of about 194 million out of 482 million workers as per 2011 census. Besides, there are about 15 million short-term migrant workers of temporary and circulatory nature. The national lockdown created havoc in the lives of the millions who are similarly involved in the informal sector. So they lost their life overnight and got stranded in different pockets. So as speculated by ILO 2020, India is likely to face the job crisis because of the COVID-19. But here I would like to add one more point, not only the job crisis, but a new humanitarian crisis may be unfolding in this country. Researchers are claiming migration due to COVID-19 is several times greater in both number and severity than the historical migrations after the partition that we have already got experience. And social distancing in the pandemic era stimulates social problems and challenges. social distance and lockdown are interlinked. To ensure social distance, lockdown is made obligatory. Anecdotal evidence shows that despite strict restrictions by the way of social distancing, many domestic workers initially had to go to work as they struggled to procure basic necessities like food, shelter, and medication amid the crude circumstances of the lockdown. Unable to travel, a huge number of domestic workers have been relieved of their jobs without adequate payment, and there are others who have received pay cuts for their subsequent months. So many were reported to break the government norms and arrested. Keeping in view of such challenges, it is evidential to understand the ground reality of society and why the challenge the social distancing norms to combat the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. Then there is a matter of overcrowding. India is the country with more than 1.3 million of people and has a population of density of 464 per square kilometer. An average Indian family has 5 members and 40 persons for all homes. That is 100 million homes have only one room. Social distancing is only possible if one has a large house. So in short, the mechanism of...
It says present now, so I don't know if that means it shares my screen. Let me put, let's see if that works. Present now. Ooh. A window, here we go. So I'm just going to share this. Hopefully you can see my slides now.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, great.
No,
okay, so
it is not visible. It is not visible. It is not visible.
The slides are not visible?
Yes.
Right now,
yes, right now. Yes, it is visible.
Yeah. Okay, great. So thanks very much for the introduction. And the idea of this is to just give an idea of what challenges policymakers, particularly obviously those advising healthcare initiatives across countries. So those kind of in the UK, we have the chief medical officer and the chief scientific officers providing advice to the British government, and obviously there's political decisions to be made on the interpretation of data and that sort of thing. So it's looking at that kind of nexus between the political and the scientific is what my area of particular interest in some of this. Little bit on who I am, as you said, there's me. And I am studying my PhD and I was working for the Commonwealth on local government stuff. I did my MPhil in applied economics from JNU through CDS back a few years back, but I'm not an economist. I a little bit of statistics there. So my PhD is actually looking at deliberative democracy for human development and looking at how you ask people what their priorities are. So the approach to this is looking a bit about, and this is one of the main key takeaways that I'm wanting you guys to maybe have a look at, and if this is the kind of thing you're interested in, I've given some, I can share the slides and I've given a few references and things, and this might be an interesting approach for those of you who are interested in political economy. So political economy analysis is concerned with the interaction between the political and economic processes within a society, between the distribution of power and wealth, between different groups and individuals, and the process which create, sustain, and transform these relationships over time. So that's a nice introductory kind of definition, and there's a link there from SARS. But the idea is basically, whilst pure economics looks at obviously the macroeconomics, when looking at the numbers and size, many economists will admit that it often lacks the political awareness of reality of decision making, and it's not that is known and that things don't have investive interests and other things. So the political economy looks at all of that in terms of the institutions of the state, the institutions of society, which help inform how decisions are made, particularly in a political sphere, as well as obviously all the different actors, not just formal political actors like the government and political parties and others, but obviously society, lobby groups, businesses, and otherwise. So I just thought I'd give a little bit of a comparison just so folks know. I'm sure you'll all be well aware of how things are looking currently in India. You may have caught a little bit of how things have been are looking in the UK and things. But just to give a comparison, much larger country than the UK, and these are comparing absolute figures. So the UK had a massive rise and was one of the first countries to have a significant spread of the virus across the country. We had a lockdown from the 23rd of March, which effectively we were able to reduce the R rate and bring the curve down. They're starting to look at reducing the lockdown measures, but there's still quite a lot in place, and that's still, the R rate is still just teetering around 1. I don't know how much you guys know about things like the science around the R rate, the reproduction rate of how many cases per case on average get spread. It seems that with this virus, it's roughly, if it's left unchecked, it's roughly around 3, and with various measures in place, it's able to be pushed down to something like 1 or below, and that's roughly where we are in the UK. So that's just a comparison of cases, confirmed coronavirus cases. Now, one of the other obviously factors within confirmed cases is obviously that relates to how your testing capacity is. The UK had a limited testing capacity at the start of the pandemic. It's increased significantly, so they were only able to test something like over a few thousand, up to about 10,000. Then they committed themselves to, within a month, getting that up to at least 100,000 tests a day, and now they've got the capacity to be able to do up to 200,000. I think it's usually no more than 100,000 a day in terms of cast, but that capacity to actually test obviously reduced the number of actual confirmed cases, so it was more the trend that was important rather than in the UK we've also been able to do experimental statistics looking at using a sample survey to look at the actual rate of prevalence within the community. And so it looks like the rate of prevalence in the community is something around 4 to 6 times the reported incidences. So this is the reported incidence and the trend, but it's likely that the actual incidence in the country was something like between 4 and 6 times that. This is the new coronavirus cases per day. And as you can see, it's still growing exponentially in India. So as of the latest figures, we're just about on 50,000 a day. We've brought it down from a height of around 9,000. If you see the peak just in the middle for the UK's orange line, that one day was around 9,000. But and then we had a bit of a peak around the Easter period in April of around, I think, about 6,000 per day cases, and it's come down to about, you see on here, 700 odd. At the moment it's relatively static. There's been a slight increase in the last week or so, so it doesn't. There has been a secular decline in the last couple of months, and in the last week or so that's now kind of stagnated and started to a slight increase, which obviously is a concern, and keep observing. The other obviously key statistics, there are plenty of other statistics that are relevant, but the most obvious ones are the figures about people with the virus and people who've died related to it. Now the death figures are not always 100% comparable, because how different countries collate data around deaths and to what degree it's related to whether it was a death that's actually had confirmed test about coronavirus, or whether a GP has written that it's suspected that coronavirus may have been was probably a contributing factor. That slightly is different between different countries. You can see that this again is the daily rolling figures, so we got up to almost 1,000 deaths a day, and that's been very slowly coming down. There was a very quick increase up to that, about 25-30 days after the first 5 reported deaths. So within a month, it got up to quite high numbers. In the UK, we've had a particular high spread across care homes, which is where many of our elderly citizens stay, with particular supporting if they've got multiple underlying factors, they call it, then it's quite and if their coronavirus had been able to get into the care home, it's maybe a home where 20 or anywhere between 5 and 50 old people live together, then it may well be that it's spread. So that's a very big concern. The other thing that you may or may not know about the UK is obviously our National Health Service. So a lot of the focus is on our hospitals, our National Health Service, and ensuring that there was the protection, the PPE, the personal protective equipment, and things like that, and there wasn't such, and that's a nationally run health sector, a very private sector engagement with the public health sector. However, the care homes are all run independently and private, and so that's a whole sector that's very dispersed and not so easy to have coordination across from the ministry. So it did take a lot longer. We can see on the death figures we're a good trend down. India's figures have not actually yet height of that it was in the UK. It looks that obviously will be doing that in the next few weeks, and with your cases skyrocketing, it's quite likely that will continue for some time. So yes, a little bit about the UK government response from the policy side. So it initiated basically its general response to any pandemic was to look at how we contain the pandemic to stop it spreading, and then delaying the spread of it along. So moving from contain to delay was a particular decision that was based on the scientific advice as to how many cases there are and whether it's just stopping more cases coming into the country or actually stopping the spread. And then alongside that, there's investment in research and mitigating the impacts of the virus. In the UK, our scientific a set of scientists who advise the government is called the Scientific Advisory Group of Experts, SAGE, and they meet to advise cabinet, and they've obviously been meeting since January regularly, usually now around once a week, every couple of weeks. Previously, it was, at the start, it was like once a month, and then it got picked up. And it's it's chaired by the Chief Scientific Officer, jointly chaired by the Chief Scientific Officer and the Chief Medical Officer. One of the first things that the government did was initiate a Coronavirus Act, which enabled them to put in place a lot of the lockdown measures, which included things like closing ports and schools, and other things in terms of limiting the statutory requirements of some of the public sector entities to not have to do certain reporting things that were mandatory because of the lockdown and the measures. And its main three aims were to give the government the powers to slow the spread, to reduce the resourcing and administrative burden on public bodies, so to stop that minimise the necessary reporting in certain areas, and to limit the impact of staffing shortages. So one of the public services, particularly, of course, the health sector, the health services, and one of the things that the Act brought in was the ability for retired doctors and others to come back into the health service. So there was a whole kind of recruitment to bring people back into the health service. We're interested to kind of look at the policy timeline for the UK. I put the link here on the but this gives a sense of how the progress went along. So there's two slides here that shows the timeline. Back to the first, so this is the first 90 days. So basically this goes from case of pneumonia day 0, which is roughly the end of December, and then the UK has the Public Health England, which is PHE. So the Public Health England advice against travelling to Wuhan happened 10 days after that first confirmation of report to the WHO. Clinical guidance of testing across our public health sector started around then, and then after. So that's this is all of January. So throughout January, the first 30 days, you then see the first COBRA meeting, which is the cabinet briefing rooms meeting with looking at the scientific advisors group advice, the monitoring of people coming in, and then the starting of quarantining people. There's obviously an impact, a differentiated impact across class in the country, as well as between urban and rural. But that's basically how this worked. I won't go through all these different things. So basically with this website, if people are interested, you could hover on any of these little colourful dots and it'll tell you the different initiatives. Some of the ones that are quite interesting is if you look at the orange ones, you'll see the first few around day 33, 34, you'll see that they've started a vaccine development fund launched. So that's the orange one is R&D, so the government investing in research and development. So we currently have two live vaccine developments. University of Oxford led one and Imperial College led one of around, I think, 20 globally, 2 of which are in the UK. And obviously it's a global effort to coordinate and to obviously try and find a vaccine, but also to support global initiatives and for the UK to provide funding globally to help with these initiatives. And any of these orange ones are all about funding for research and evaluation. The other policy measures are very, very wide ranging, including from sport will be changing to providing food packages to people that are isolating. There was a particular thing about those who are at risk being shielded, so they were effectively told to not leave their houses at all. And the government provided food packages and a service for providing their medicines and other things like that. Most of the people were told to just shop and do outside exercise once a day, but otherwise stay at home. You'll see how there's also, so every day there was a policy briefing. We had 80 in a row, so I sat and watched annually at least an hour of daily briefings from the government's briefing platform, usually either led by the Prime Minister or a senior cabinet minister, often the health minister, telling us how all this was going on. Obviously now that these measures have started being relaxed, that has stopped on the daily basis, and they're now doing it ad hoc, roughly once a week or fortnight, to kind of keep that. Produced on a daily basis wasn't as high quality, so there was that balance between quality and timeliness. But obviously, ultimately, in terms of the data that analyze ourselves, that kind of data will be coming from the National Statistical System, which should be much more robust. So test is really just to confirm whether coronavirus was there. One of the things that funding, and they increased the amount that unemployed people were getting. So there was a significant financial commitment of the government across all sectors of the economy. Now, the issue with that is it hides the impact of all of this and the global slowdown because on the economy and beyond. Does that help a little? Does that answer a bit? I hope I got a sense of what it was you were asking.
Yes, sir. I get answer.
Jared,
Good, thank you.
Jared, I have one more question to you. That would you like to address UK's immigration policy in the era of pandemic? Can you enlighten us this issue? That how far UK?
Sure. I see there's also a few questions in the thing. Well, you've written one, haven't you? And
yes.
Sorry, I don't want to ignore people. I see. I've just opened the chat. The immigration policy. I mean, in terms of general flows of stuff, there wasn't much of a close down of flights. We were one of the only countries that didn't stop flights coming in and things. Partly, this was again on the advice of the scientists, and they had to re-justify this on multiple occasions, that basically by the time they would have actually looked to lock down any flights, the virus was already quite widespread in the country, and it wouldn't have made much difference in terms of the new cases. There was already a spread here. Now, what could I think there's an interesting global political economy question as to if there's something like this as a deadly virus that's been identified, to what ability is the global governments able to kind of shut down the whole global flights in the economy? What difference could that be done? In the UK, as with, say, Mumbai and other so London, Mumbai, other hotspots where they've got lots of people, Kerala as well, lots of flows of international migrants. Once there was already some cases here. So that was, in the UK, that was the part of the contain system, where it said, oh, contain was the first. Anyone coming in from Wuhan, anyone coming in from China had to self-isolate, and then anyone coming in from other countries where there was outbreaks. Because we were one of the first to have such a significant outbreak, there weren't many other countries except China who were clearly had a greater risk of having the virus for people coming in. Now, I think the discussion is somewhat different. So moving forward, as the cases come down in the UK, how the government is managing international flows of people who maybe come from countries that have got higher rates of coronavirus. Unfortunately, it seems very, very political and not necessarily medically led. So the UK government has made lots and lots of deals across lots of countries to have these things they're calling flight bridges or something like that. So just an agreement between two countries. Now that keeps changing. So this week, there's a lot of flow of people from the UK to Spain for holidays in the summer. This last week, there's been an increase in cases in Spain, and so they've just re-changed the advice that you now do have to quarantine for 2 weeks after the last month telling everyone that they could book holidays for Spain for the summer and they wouldn't have to. So I think that's a real balance, particularly to do with the tourist economy and the summer economy as people try to open up. But yeah, let me just read, as Aaron has posted here, and D-Ditter as well. So D-Ditter, do you think that this slowly increased state control on people due to this pandemic is slowly going to affect the essence of being human in any way in the long run? Good question. I think it's hard to know. In the UK, we're very proud of our civil liberties. I believe in India that is the case as well. So I think there'll be a lot of pushback if certain measures that are seen as somewhat draconian are not are kept in place when there isn't a medical advice. I think it is hard. I think the UK hesitated in possibly maybe too long. I think maybe we should have had stricter measures in earlier, and we may have had much less deaths and cases. And they were very worried about bringing in what was seen as quite draconian measures in terms of asking people to stay at home and that sort of thing. I think it'll be interesting to see how things go in the future, because obviously now everyone's experienced this, everyone who's currently around. So this generation has experienced a pandemic, a global pandemic where there's been lockdown. I think it'll be a lot easier to tell people you have to do this again. But I think there needs to be the robust scrutiny in place for that to only happen as and when it was needed, rather than because the government had a different. There's all kinds of lockdown. view is I feel that the UK and the government have quite a lot of good structures in place to stop too much abuse of that sort of thing. But you know, concerns, and I often find concerns a bit often reactionary and not necessarily fact-based, and possibly party political rather than actual concerns. But you know, the concerns around privacy obviously are valid concerns. So. To what degree should the government